Snow fell like whispers from the heavens, soft, endless, and merciless all the same. Downtown lights flickered under the pale storm, and every breath turned into mist before vanishing into the frozen air. Under an old street lamp that buzzed weakly against the wind, a woman stood clutching a small child, her arms wrapped tightly around him as if she could shield him from the world itself. Her name was Clara Wells, 31 years old, and on that winter night, she had nowhere left to run. Her coat was threadbare, her boots soaked through, and the child in her arms, Noah, barely 4, was trembling. She pressed her lips against his forehead, whispering softly, "Shh, baby. Mommy's here. Mommy's here." But her voice cracked, fragile as glass. She'd been walking for hours, knocking on doors that never opened, calling numbers that went unanswered. Every shelter was full. Every friend had moved on. The city was loud, yet it never heard her. She sat down on the edge of a bus bench, her knees weak, her fingers numb. Her son stirred, his tiny voice muffled against her chest. "Mommy, are we going home now?" Her heart broke quietly. Home. That word didn't belong to them anymore. The last eviction notice still burned in her memory. The landlord's flat voice. The neighbors watching as she packed a lifetime into 2 bags. She'd told herself she could fix things, find another place, get back on her feet. But jobs didn't come easy when your world had already fallen apart. The bus stop was empty. Snow piled around her boots like time itself was burying her. And then, she heard footsteps, slow, steady, and hesitant. Across the quiet street, under the golden blur of a diner sign, a man stood watching. He wasn't young, maybe late 30s, with tired eyes and a scarf pulled up against the cold. His name was Evan Carter, a name she would remember for the rest of her life, though she didn't know it yet. Evan had been walking the city streets for no reason at all. He did that sometimes, just to escape the silence of his empty apartment. He was an architect once, a dreamer once, a husband once, but those titles had all faded after an accident 2 winters ago took his wife and unborn daughter. Since then he had walked, just walked, as if the cold could numb the ache that warmth never could. And then he saw her. A mother, huddled beneath a street lamp, holding a child as the snow swallowed the world around them. Something inside him stopped moving. He crossed the street slowly, unsure of what he was even doing. His boots crunched against the snow, echoing softly between them. Clara stiffened. Her instinct was fear. Too many strangers, too many broken promises. "I'm sorry," she whispered quickly, her voice small. "We're just waiting for the bus." Evan paused a few feet away, his hands visible, his tone gentle. "It's okay," he said softly. "But I don't think the buses are running tonight." Clara looked down. She didn't want to meet his eyes. "I'll wait," she murmured. "Someone will come." He studied her for a moment, the cracked shoes, the trembling hands, the way she pulled her son closer without even realizing. Then he looked across the street again, at the diner's glowing windows. "It's warm in there," he said quietly. "At least come in for a bit. Just until the snow eases up." She shook her head. "We can't. I don't have any money." He smiled faintly, not out of pity, but something deeper, a softness he hadn't felt in years. "I didn't ask for money," he said. "Just warmth." For a long moment, the snow was the only sound between them. Then Noah whimpered in her arms, shivering harder. "Mommy, I'm cold." Clara closed her eyes. Every instinct screamed against trusting anyone again. But a mother's heart doesn't argue with her child's pain. She nodded. "Okay," she whispered. Evan exhaled, relieved, and stepped aside, letting her lead the way. The diner door chimed softly as they entered, and a wave of heat wrapped around them like a forgotten memory. Inside, the world felt different, alive. The smell of coffee, the faint hum of an old jukebox, the reflection of yellow lights on chrome counters. The waitress glanced up but said nothing, her eyes softening as she saw Clara's frozen hands and the child pressed against her shoulder. They sat in a booth near the window. Evan ordered hot chocolate and soup. When the cups arrived, Clara held them as if afraid they'd vanish. She whispered a thank you that barely reached his ears. Noah sipped from his cup, and for the first time that night, his eyes sparkled. Watching that tiny smile, something stirred in Evan, something human, something he thought he'd buried. Clara didn't know it yet, But this stranger in a navy coat would change her life in ways she couldn't imagine, and Evan didn't know it yet. But that night, kindness would bring his heart back from the dead. That night in the diner was supposed to be a brief moment of shelter. But fate had just begun its quiet work, and by morning, neither of them would ever be the same again. The snow had slowed by the time dawn began to bloom, painting the diner windows in faint shades of gold and gray. Outside, the city was still asleep, buried under white silence. Inside, the little booth by the window glowed softly beneath the flickering neon sign. Clara sat there, her hands cupped around the mug that had long gone cold. Across from her, Evan sat with his jacket draped over the chair, his gaze lost in the world beyond the window. They hadn't spoken much. Some silences don't need to be filled. Noah had fallen asleep on the seat beside his mother, his cheek pressed against her arm, his breath steady now. For the first time in days, he wasn't shivering. Evan broke the silence gently. "You should rest. You've been out there all night." Clara shook her head. "If I close my eyes, I'll wake up somewhere else. Somewhere worse." Her words hit deeper than she intended. He didn't reply at first, just nodded slowly, understanding the kind of fear that comes from losing everything. A waitress came by, refilling Evan's coffee. Her name tag read Doris. She gave Clara a small smile, the kind strangers give when they wish they could do more. "Refills are free today, honey," she said kindly. "For you too." Clara nodded in quiet thanks. When Doris left, she looked at Evan, her eyes hesitant. "You didn't have to do this. The food, the coffee, all of it." Evan smiled faintly. "You didn't have to say thank you either, but you did." That simple sentence, gentle, effortless, made her eyes sting. It had been a long time since someone had spoken to her like she was still human, not a burden or a problem to solve. After a pause, Evan asked softly, "Where were you heading?" She hesitated, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "Anywhere warm. Anywhere safe." Her voice dropped lower. "But I guess that's not a place anymore." Evan leaned back, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "You from around here?" Clara nodded faintly. "Born in Chicago. Worked at a daycare. Things were okay for a while, then life decided it wanted a piece of me." He didn't push her for more. She noticed that and appreciated it. People often wanted to know your pain but not share it. Across the booth, Evan's eyes flicked briefly to the snow outside. "Life's good at that," he murmured. "Taking what you don't think it can reach." The way he said it, quiet, broken, made her realize he was no stranger to loss himself. "Was it someone?" she asked softly. Evan's lips tightened, his eyes lowering to the table. "Her name was Anna, my wife. He stopped, letting out a slow breath. "She and our daughter didn't make it after a car accident 2 winters ago. Since then, I've just been walking." Clara's voice trembled. "I'm sorry," he nodded. "Me too." Silence again. But this time it wasn't cold. It was heavy with understanding. 2 people on different paths of pain, finding for once someone who didn't ask them to be okay. Noah stirred softly, half asleep. "Mommy?" Clara brushed his hair. "It's okay, sweetheart. Go back to sleep." Evan watched that tenderness and the way she protected him even while falling apart herself. Something inside him shifted. He cleared his throat. "You can't stay out there again tonight," he said gently. "The storm's supposed to come back worse." She shook her head. "We'll figure something out, Clara," he said softly. "You don't have to pretend." Her jaw tightened. "Pretending is all I have left." The diner door opened and a gust of wind swirled in. Doris called out to the cook, laughing, breaking the heavy silence for a moment. But when the door shut again, it was just them. 2 lonely souls hiding from a world that had forgotten them. Evan took a slow breath, his eyes lingering on the frost-covered street. "There's an old apartment building a few blocks from here. My place, it's not big, but it's warm. You and your boy can stay for a night if you want. Just until you figure things out." Clara's head shot up. "No," she said quickly. "I can't. You've done enough already." "I insist. I don't even know you." He nodded. "Then get to know me. While you're warm." Her chest tightened. She didn't want to trust anyone again. Trust had cost her everything once. But then she looked at Noah, his tiny fingers gripping her sleeve even in his sleep, and realized pride didn't keep a child safe. Still, She hesitated. "Why are you doing this?" Evan's eyes softened. "Because once someone stopped for me too, and it changed everything." For a moment, Clara said nothing. Then she whispered almost to herself, "We have nowhere to go." Evan's gaze met hers, steady and warm. "You do now." As they stepped out of the diner and into the snow again, Clara didn't know it yet, but the man beside her wasn't just offering shelter. He was offering a new beginning. Snow whispered against the empty streets as Clara followed Evan through the quiet dawn. The wind had softened, but the cold still bit through her thin coat. She held Noah close, the boy's small arms draped around her neck, his breath warm against her shoulder. Evan walked a few steps ahead, his hands deep in his pockets, glancing back now and then to make sure they were keeping up. He didn't speak, and neither did she. Sometimes silence is the only language that doesn't hurt. The neighborhood grew quieter as they moved away from downtown. Smaller buildings, older shops, a laundromat with frosted windows, a corner cafe that hadn't opened yet. And then at the end of a narrow street stood an old brick apartment building with a single porch light still glowing against the gray sky. Evan stopped at the steps. "This is it," he said softly. Clara hesitated. The place wasn't fancy, but it looked safe. Safer than anywhere she'd been in weeks. She looked at him uncertainly. "Are you sure about this?" He smiled faintly. "I wouldn't have offered if I wasn't." He led her inside. The stairwell smelled faintly of coffee and dust, the kind of scent that felt oddly comforting. His apartment was on the 3rd floor, a small one-bedroom with warm yellow walls, a worn sofa, and the faint hum of a heater that groaned like an old friend. Clara stepped inside slowly, like she was entering someone's memory. "Sit," Evan said gently. "You both look like you could use a minute." She nodded, lowering Noah onto the couch. The little boy sank into the cushions, half asleep. For the first time in days, he looked peaceful. Evan walked into the kitchen, his footsteps soft against the wooden floor. The clinking of mugs followed, then the sound of boiling water. He returned with 2 steaming cups, 1 cocoa, 1 tea. "I didn't know what you liked," he said. Clara took the tea with shaking hands. "Anything warm?" she whispered. He nodded, settling into a chair near the window. Outside, the city was waking up. Buses groaning, people rushing, unaware that a small miracle was unfolding in this quiet apartment. Clara looked around. There were photos on a nearby shelf. A smiling woman with auburn hair, a man beside her with the same tired eyes as Evan's. One picture showed a baby room half-painted, the word hope faintly penciled on the wall. She realized then, this was a house built on memories that never got to grow. Evan noticed her gaze. He didn't look away, but there was pain in his eyes. "That's Anna," he said quietly. "My wife." Clara's heart ached. "She looks kind." She was. He smiled faintly. "She'd have done what I did tonight, probably sooner. She had a thing for helping strangers. Said kindness wasn't charity, it was humanity." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was soft, healing. Clara glanced toward Noah. "I'm sorry if this feels strange. We didn't mean to intrude." Evan shook his head. "You didn't. I've had this place to myself for 2 years. Feels less empty tonight." That sentence lingered in her heart like warmth spreading through frost. For a while they sat there, the heater humming, Noah breathing quietly. Clara told him little pieces of her life, how she'd once worked at a daycare, how Noah loved to draw cars on every scrap of paper, how things just fell apart. "It started with bills," she said softly. "Then hours cut at work. Then Mark, Noah's father, decided we were better off without him." She looked down, her voice breaking. "Turns out we weren't." Evan didn't interrupt. He just listened. Sometimes listening is the most powerful kindness there is. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "You're stronger than you think, Clara." Her eyes glistened. "I don't feel strong. People who survive this world never do," he said. "But they are." That night she helped Noah settle under a blanket on the couch. Evan offered her the bedroom, but she refused. "We'll be fine here," she said softly. "You've already done too much." He didn't argue. He just nodded and handed her a pillow. "Good night, Clara." She looked up at him, the city lights flickering across his face. "Good night, Evan." Later, when he turned off the lamp and the room went quiet, Clara stayed awake for a while, watching the snow drift outside the window. Noah's tiny hand rested in hers. His breathing was calm. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't scared. But as she closed her eyes, she couldn't shake the thought. Nothing this kind lasts forever. And across the room, Evan sat by the window, unable to sleep. He watched her silhouette under the blanket, the faint rise and fall of a mother who'd fought too long, and he whispered into the darkness, almost like a prayer. Please, let them stay safe here. In that small apartment, two broken hearts had finally found warmth. But the past has a cruel way of finding its way back, and by the next sunrise, the peace they'd found would begin to tremble. The morning light filtered through faded curtains, painting soft, golden lines across the old apartment. For the first time in a long time, Clara woke up without panic in her chest. Noah was still asleep, curled under a thick blanket, his small hand gripping his stuffed toy. The quiet hum of the heater filled the room, steady, gentle, like a heartbeat. She sat up slowly, brushing her hair back, and saw Evan standing by the stove. The smell of frying eggs and toast filled the air. He looked up with a small smile. "Morning," he said. "You and Noah slept like the world finally gave you a break." Clara managed a soft smile. It felt like it did. Evan poured 2 cups of coffee, the steam rising like fragile hope. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said. "No strings attached." Her lips parted, eyes glistening. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," he said, handing her the cup. "By trusting me enough to walk in that door." For the next few days, something changed. The apartment that once echoed with silence now carried the sound of laughter. Noah giggling as he built towers from old cereal boxes. Clara humming softly while folding laundry. Evan smiling quietly from across the room. They didn't have much, but somehow it felt like home. On the 4th evening, as snow began to fall again, they all sat together watching a movie. Noah had fallen asleep midway, his head resting on Clara's lap. Evan looked at her and said quietly, "You know, he reminds me of what peace used to feel like." Clara looked at Noah, then at Evan. "You remind me of what safety feels like." Their eyes met, soft, hesitant, but real. It wasn't love yet. It was something gentler, trust, the kind that takes root quietly and grows without asking for permission. But peace has a fragile heartbeat, and that night it almost stopped. It was past midnight when a sudden knock echoed through the apartment. Loud, demanding, Evan froze. Clara's eyes widened. Her hands trembled as she pulled Noah close. The knock came again, sharper this time. "Clara!" a rough voice shouted through the door. "I know you're in there." Evan's jaw tightened. "Who is it?" Her voice barely escaped her throat. "Mark." Evan's eyes darkened. "The father?" She nodded, clutching Noah's shoulders. He found us." The knocking turned into pounding. "Clara, open the damn door before I break it." Evan stood, his calm replaced by steel. "Stay with Noah," she whispered. "Please don't, he's dangerous." But Evan didn't flinch. He opened the door just enough to face the man on the other side. Mark was tall, unshaven, and reeking of anger, the kind of anger that fed on control. His eyes darted past Evan, searching for Clara. "Who the hell are you?" Mark snapped. "Someone who cares about what happens inside this door," Evan said evenly. Mark smirked. "You think she needs you?" "She's my family." "Funny," Evan replied. "Families don't show up in the middle of the night screaming." Mark's face twisted. "Stay out of this." "She's coming with me." Behind Evan, Clara's voice trembled. "No, Mark, I'm not." That stopped him. His stare shot past Evan, locking onto her. "You think you can run from me forever?" Clara shook her head, holding Noah tighter. "I'm not running anymore." The silence stretched like a held breath. Then Mark's voice dropped low, venomous. "You'll regret this." Evan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Leave before you regret something too." For a moment, Mark's fists tightened. Then, with a growl, he turned and stormed down the hall, slamming the stairwell door behind him. Evan closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling hard. The apartment fell silent again, but it wasn't peace this time. It was the sound of fear trying to calm itself. Clara was shaking. Evan crossed the room slowly and knelt in front of her. "He's gone," he said softly. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "For now," she whispered. "He always comes back." Evan hesitated, then reached out, placing a steady hand over hers. "Then he'll have to go through me next time." Something inside her broke, not in pain but in release. For the first time, someone wasn't walking away. That night, Clara realized what safety truly felt like, and how fragile it could be. But she didn't know. Mark wasn't done. He'd left something behind that would soon tear their fragile world apart. The next morning, the world looked calm again, but sometimes calm is just fear wearing a softer face. Clara moved through the apartment quietly, her eyes always flicking toward the door. Noah was coloring by the table, humming softly. Evan sat near the window, pretending to read, though his eyes hadn't moved across the same page in 10 minutes. They hadn't spoken much since the night before. Words felt fragile. One wrong one could make the silence shatter. Finally, Clara spoke. "I'm sorry, Evan," he looked up. "For what?" "For bringing that chaos here. For dragging my mess into your peace," he closed the book. "Clara, you didn't drag anything. You just needed somewhere safe." She looked down. "You don't know him like I do."
"Mark doesn't just give up?"
"If he knows where I am, he won't touch you," Evan interrupted gently. "Not while I'm here." The way he said it made her believe him. Not because of strength, but because of conviction. The kind that comes from loss. But something flickered behind his eyes, something she hadn't noticed before, a quiet ache like he was fighting a ghost of his own. Later that day, while Evan went out to get groceries, Clara decided to clean up the small study room. Papers, books, and a few old boxes sat untouched in the corner. She moved them gently, careful not to disturb what wasn't hers. But then one envelope slid out from between two old photo albums. Her name wasn't on it. It was addressed to Anna. She froze. Anna, Evan's late wife. The paper was yellowed, but the handwriting was steady. Something inside her whispered, "Don't read it." But curiosity and care tangled inside her heart. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. "Anna, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't find the words to say what I needed to while you were still here. I should have been there that night. I should have driven instead of you. Every time I hear sirens, I still wonder if that was the universe's way of reminding me. It should have been me. I promised you I'd keep my heart closed after you, because loving again felt like betrayal. But lately I find myself wondering, what if the only way to honor you is to live again? You once told me that grief isn't a chain, it's a bridge. Maybe you were right. Maybe someone will cross it one day, and I'll learn to breathe again." Evan, by the time Clara finished, tears had blurred the ink. She folded the letter back, her chest aching, not from sadness but from understanding. Evan wasn't just kind. He was broken too. When he returned that evening, she was sitting by the window, holding Noah. The light outside had dimmed, painting everything in muted gold. He noticed her expression instantly. "What's wrong?" She looked up slowly. "I found something." "A letter," he froze. His voice went quiet. "To Anna?" She nodded. "I didn't mean to pry, It's okay," he said quickly, sitting down. His hands rubbed together nervously. "I wrote that on the first anniversary after the accident. Never sent it, obviously." Clara hesitated, then whispered, "You blamed yourself." He exhaled. "Still do some days." His voice cracked. "She was on her way to pick me up from work. The brakes failed halfway down the hill. If I'd taken the car that morning," she interrupted softly, "then you'd be gone, Evan. And maybe I wouldn't have met you." He looked at her then, really looked. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of everything they hadn't said. Outside, snow began to fall again. Soft, slow, like the world exhaling. Clara reached for his hand, hesitated halfway, then finally let her fingers rest on his. "Evan," she said quietly, "you didn't betray her by helping us. You honored her." Something in him broke then, not in pain but in release. His eyes glistened, and for the first time, he let himself smile without guilt. They sat there for a long time, two broken souls finding warmth in the same silence. But peace, once again, didn't stay long, because just as the night deepened, the phone on the counter began to ring. Unknown number. Clara frowned and answered, and the voice that came through made her blood run cold. "Enjoying my son's new home, Clara?" It was Mark. Her hand shook. "What do you want?" He laughed softly. "You'll see. You should have never told me where you used to work. Guess who just found your new address?" The call ended. She turned, terrified. "Evan, he knows." Evan's eyes darkened. "Then we're not waiting anymore. He stood, grabbed his jacket, and opened the door. "Stay inside. I'm ending this tonight." "Evan, wait," Clara cried. But he was already gone. The door shut behind him, and for the first time since she met him, the warmth in the apartment vanished. He'd gone to protect her, but some pasts can't be fought in the dark. When the night ends, one of them may not come back. The city was quiet again, too quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. Evan's car cut through the cold night, headlights slicing through snow that drifted like ghosts across the empty streets. His jaw was tight, his hands gripping the steering wheel harder than he realized. He didn't know exactly where Mark was, but something in his gut told him. Men like that don't stay hidden long. They like being seen, they like control. And Evan was done letting people like him win. Back at the apartment, Clara paced the floor, clutching Noah's blanket like a lifeline. Every sound from outside and every engine, every door made her flinch. "Mommy," Noah whispered, rubbing his eyes. "Where's Mr. Evan?" Her voice trembled. He's helping us, sweetheart. He'll be back soon." But even as she said it, she wasn't sure. Outside, Evan's car pulled into the same street where Clara had once stood months ago. Cold, scared, alone. Now it was him in the snow. But this time, he wasn't alone in spirit. He parked beside a dimly lit bar, and there, leaning against a car, was Mark, smirking, cigarette in hand, his eyes dark and mocking. "So," Mark called out, flicking the cigarette into the snow, "you're the hero?" Evan stepped closer. "You're the coward who hits women and scares kids," Mark chuckled. "Careful, architect. You build houses, I break people." Evan didn't flinch. "Not this one." Mark lunged first, his fist cutting through the cold air, but Evan caught it, pushed him back, years of anger and guilt pouring out in one motion. They stumbled, fell into the snow, both breathing hard. Evan didn't hit back. He just stood between Mark and the direction of home. "You want me?" he shouted. "Fine, but you don't go near her again," Mark sneered. "You think she'll stay with you? You're just a broken man clinging to another broken soul." Evan's eyes softened, not with anger, but truth. "Maybe, but broken things can still protect what's left of the good." Before Mark could move again, blue and red lights flashed across the snow. Police sirens, Evan didn't call them, but Clara had. She couldn't just sit and wait. She stood now by the curb, Noah's small hand in hers, eyes wide with fear and determination. "Enough," she said, voice steady as the officers stepped between them. "It ends tonight." Mark glared, but the fight was gone. The police pulled him back, his shouts fading under the swirl of sirens and snow. When it was over, Clara ran to Evan. He was bleeding slightly from his lip. But his eyes, they were calm. "I told you not to come," he said softly. She smiled through tears. "You told me to stay safe." "And I did, by not losing you," he laughed. A real laugh, quiet and warm, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For a long moment, they stood there in the snow, the world still spinning around them, but for the first time, neither of them felt lost. Weeks passed. The case was handled. Mark was gone, at least from their world. Spring came shyly that year, hesitant after the long winter. The apartment, once cold and quiet, now smelled of pancakes and crayons. Evan sat by the window, watching Noah build a Lego tower that leaned slightly to one side. Clara walked in with 2 mugs of coffee, her hair loose, her smile softer than he'd ever seen. "You know," she said, setting the cups down, "Noah calls this place home now." Evan looked around the room, the blanket on the couch, the drawings on the fridge, the laughter in the air. "It feels like one." She sat beside him. "You once wrote," she said carefully, "that grief is a bridge. Maybe this is the other side," he smiled. "Then I'm glad I crossed it with you." Outside, the first spring snow began to melt, the light catching on tiny drops that shimmered like hope reborn. Evan reached for her hand. "You once said you had nowhere to go," he whispered. Clara looked at him, her eyes glistening. "And you said?" He finished softly, "You do now." Noah's laughter echoed through the apartment, bright, free, alive, and as Evan pulled Clara into his arms, the snow stopped falling. Not because the world was done grieving, but because it had finally learned to breathe again. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks or fate. It walks in quietly on a cold night, holding out its hand and saying, "You're not alone anymore." If this story touched your heart, like, share, and comment you do now to remind someone that kindness